I did somehow not via banners and statements on other television programs, but from friends who say, I watch your show regularly and I like it. And that's encouraging because I like to do something that my public would like, and I know you would too. So it's a joy to collaborate with others. So I have a guest here today that many of you know, Richard Doze, Dr. Richard Doze, a clinical psychologist and a Buddhist and a teacher, and he has many facets and many background interests, and he's here with me today. And we're going to talk about human hope and the aspect of hope. Hope for the future, hope for the party, hope for our family, hope for our health, hope for our life situation, whatever it might be. And it's a persistent theme in our lives, and we're going to talk about that. So we invite you to participate with us on public access and to phone in and to give us your thoughts about human hope. We have 1 hour, and we want you to be with us, and not just in spirit, but verbally, to call up the studio and to add your 2 cents or your $200 or your $1 million, whatever you would like to help us make this a worthwhile program. We need your participation. It's not like the regular TV station where you can't say anything that's going to be repeated publicly. Here it's repeated publicly with your voice right on the air. And so to get doing that, phone the studio, and the studio's phone number right in the control room. We get Bill, who runs the machine, is on our TV screen in the bottom section of it. Ask your help to read the number, the telephone number, for the public to call.
It is 651-0589. 651-0589.
Okay, please do that. That way we can make you another member of the group here. And then if you're watching the show but it's not live, and then you have to leave a message for us, an email. And our email address is also on the television screen. And if you write us an email message, we'll respond to you however you would like. So we want you to participate with us. So
you might have some hope that some callers would decide to join us.
Well, hope talking with us today.
Yes.
This Wednesday.
Right. Today, yes, live.
Today, yes.
Right.
I wasn't sure on what level of hope you were addressing this subject. A lot of people say they like the show, and then I say, well, phone in, we want to hear your voice. But they're reluctant to phone in for some reason. I don't know, they don't want to be on television, I guess. This is just old home week here, and for me, I guess it's that way for you, but for a lot of people, it's scary to be on television. But it's
not that bad.
No, it's not.
Fairly painless.
So, do you want to start out, Richard, by talking about hope, human hope?
Hope springs eternal. Isn't that a Shakespearean phrase?
Yes, from the human breast.
Yeah. So Shakespeare being a pretty good reader of the human temperament and operating style, gives us the key to that kind of yearning, I think, for what?
Whatever that's important to us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that we'll make the basketball team, hope that we'll get married, hope that we'll have a baby, hope that we'll be promoted, hope that we'll be able to retire with enough money to live on, hope that the market will not ruin us the way the market is these days. We have a lot of hope that's operative in all of us. Whether you're a religious person or not, it doesn't have to do anything directly with prayer or church or God. It's a broad understanding about hope.
And the fact that it springs eternal has an interesting kind of quality to it, that it's
Do you want to address that?
that everybody has it. Maybe every living thing has hope that they're going to be safe, that they're going to be free from suffering, that they're going to be able to be happy.
I think so.
So that it's a universal aspiration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just a religious component at all. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah. My mother always used to say, hope for the best, but be prepared for
what might happen.
Yeah, the realities that sometimes dash our hopes.
They do. They do. And then there's some people who have very little hope. Life has been cruel for them in their experience, and they feel that life doesn't have much for them to offer, and much for them to have a chance to receive. And I think that's sad if they've lost all sense of hope.
That seems to connote, hopelessness seems to connote, in that context, a quality of having given up.
Yeah.
Given up hope.
Yeah, that's a good statement. Why would someone, doctor, why would someone give up hope?
Wow. Why would someone give up hope when they think things are hopeless? When they have been crushed, I think, as you intimated, by oppression, I think comes to mind.
Years ago, I was a chaplain in a New York City hospital, a public hospital, but we also were taking care of patients at Sloan Kettering, a private hospital that was specializing in cancer care. And I met a gentleman who was a survivor of Hitler's regime, and I met his wife, and he and his wife had been imprisoned in a concentration camp. And this man, somehow, he had the hope and the guts to overpower a Nazi guard, and he put on the guard's uniform and led himself and his wife out of the prison.
Wow.
They escaped all the way to England.
Wow.
And he got another job there in England, and he eventually came to the United States. And finally, he retired and went down to Florida to live. He and his wife, they survived everything they'd been through. I mean, a transcontinental move, a whole new language. He wasn't German anymore. He had to speak English.
Sure.
It was a major shift, but he was up for it, and he was able to do it. But he got cancer down in Florida, and he saw a doctor who destroyed this brave man's hope. The doctor said, "You have cancer, brain cancer in your skull, and there's nothing anyone can do for you, and it's hopeless." And that broke his will, his ability to cope, his hope for the future. And it smashed him so much that this man who could take on Adolf Hitler and win, this man stopped relating to his wife, stop talking to anyone. He just went into himself. And it was just tragic. I tried to talk with him, but he had no interest. It wasn't because he was a Jew and he wasn't religious, Christian. It was that he had lost all hope for himself and I guess for anyone, even though he had been through so much and overcome so much. His wife was just brokenhearted because her beloved husband, who saved her from Adolf Hitler, brought her to this country, he just gave up. Just gave up. He just wouldn't talk anymore. And I wanted to strangle the doctor who told him that. The doctor should have said, I don't know what we can do for you, but we're going to do our damnedest. We're going to do everything possible for you.
Yes, to keep that hope alive.
Yeah, but the doctor wouldn't say that. I suppose the doctor felt he was being truthful, but he was being destructive, really.
And did the man soon thereafter perish?
He did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He believed the doctor's verdict.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And I've known patients who have had predictions of death, and they said, not me, I'm not going to die, and they didn't. So it depends on your attitude, not just your medical diagnosis.
And that one example you gave shows both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I still grieve for that man. I really do.
Yeah. Did you ever talk to that doctor about?
The doctor was in Florida, and I was in New York City.
I see. Yeah.
So I never met the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But it was.
So there's a quality that you touch on there of some kind of inner optimism that's associated with hope.
Hope, yeah.
Typically associated with hope is a...
I don't know what its source is. I mean, he wasn't particularly a religious man.
He was certainly a man of action, a can-do kind of guy. It sounded like he made a decision fairly quickly and acted on it.
Yeah.
And it's tricky.
That was a special time in my life because this was still in the aftermath of Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And I met a lot of other patients who had struggles with Adolf Hitler and his legions, and many of them had survived. And you don't get that anymore now. We're all getting older. But at that time, I was still young, and my patients were relatively young. And they had a lot to tell me about what happened and their hope that they had to survive the evil that Adolf Hitler presented.
Eternal spring in their heart, so that somehow they could prevail in the face of the darkness of the situation, whereas I think a lot of people just give up hope.
Well, you're a clinical psychologist. In less dramatic ways, I suppose. I mean, not with Adolf Hitler, but do you find some people who just give up and don't really want to work to save themselves?
Well, typically they wouldn't be coming to see me, and if that was the case, I think the people that look for assistance have some kind of hope that they're going to get it, that they're going to get help.
Well said, Richard. Well said.
I remember a book by a psychiatrist named Jerome Frank.
Yes, I remember that.
From the 50s, I think, called Persuasion and Healing.
I guess I don't know that book.
If I recall the title correctly. And the theme of the book was that something in the neighborhood of 70% of the factor in healing has to do with your belief or hope that you will be healed.
Yeah.
In conjunction with going to a person that you have faith in, a doctor, a priest, a psychologist, have faith that they are going to help you to recover, that expectation of healing is the biggest part that's involved in the healing process. In other words, that they're open to receiving.
You know, some people are not open to receiving hope. They say, I have a lot of friends who have died, and I'm going to die too, and I don't think there's any hope for me at all.
And sometimes in other cultures, if somebody has a curse put on them and said that you're going to, the evil eye is upon you, they literally keel over and die.
Yeah.
Because they believe that there is no hope once that curse is laid on them. So it takes a lot of, what would you call it, heart? Do you have to have,
remember there was a popular song, you got to have heart.
You got to have heart, yeah.
That's true.
Just those, without heart, if you don't have the heart, then you won't have the energy to survive if your heart is depleted. Heavy-hearted,
Yeah.
downtrodden.
Yeah. So how do you find hope if you are stuck with a nasty diagnosis? How do you find hope?
Indeed, how do you find hope? I think that the major factor involved in that is your own inner fire.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a fire within, if you have even a stubbornness, confidence in your strength of will. I think will has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that your friend who had gotten out of the Nazis' clutches when told that he had hopeless brain cancer, his will disappeared. He just didn't have the will anymore.
Yeah.
So the will to live is a very important factor. People have sometimes will themselves to wait to die until their loved one gets to their bedside, for example. I've heard cases of that nature, where you can literally influence the tide of events. You can't completely alter the inevitable, but you can influence the tide by virtue of your will.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I think that's a very important point of somehow having will. And then I think when one is downcast and downtrodden and depressed, the will gets pretty depleted. So I would link will and hope together. Otherwise, maybe if you're hoping for a rescue from outside, for example, you're hoping that the doctor's going to give you good news. And he gives you bad news, like your man who died in Florida. His hope at that point was external, that the doctor would give him good news. And he lost his internal hope.
Yeah.
So maintaining one's will to prevail, whatever the odds, I think even goes beyond hope. I remember I wrote down a quote that I can't bring up exactly, but it was from Winston Churchill. Remember him?
Oh, yeah.
The Prime Minister of England, of Britain in the World War II era, who was a very inspiring figure. You may recall him in his speeches, Reverend Udell.
Yeah.
But he was in his early experience he was I believe in the Army. He was an Army officer, and he was captured in the Boer War, I think, in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. If there's a historian in the audience who can correct that, please call. But he was imprisoned, Lee.
He was imprisoned by whom?
By the whoever the Boers were, whoever they were fighting in South Africa. And he was quoted as saying that once he had given up hope of rescue from outside sources, then his will to do something about it arose. And he effectuated, as they say, an escape plan which was carried out successfully. Or maybe it wasn't successful, but he got out eventually. So that brings up the element of hope, where I think hope can be seen as waiting for rescue from outside. And sometimes there isn't going to be rescue from outside.
Oh, this is pretty grim.
And in the Buddhist tradition, that at the point at which you acknowledge that there's certain things in one's life that nobody's going to rescue you from. Basically, the need to take responsibility for your own well-being and your own life decisions. When you give up hope that someone's going to tell you what to do, then maybe it's possible for you to decide yourself.
Yeah.
So to speak, and as it were.
There are a lot of big problems in our lives. They're not easily resolved.
And nonetheless, if you can appreciate, even when things are their worst, I recall concentration camp stories of people who were inspired by a flower. That a flower somehow was growing in a place that was usually trampled and muddy, and they saw a flower. The life force was still there. So sources of inspiration.
That's the source of hope.
And inspiration literally means to breathe in.
Yes, you're right.
To energize yourself. Breathe deeply. And I think a lot of times when people give up hope, they literally stop breathing.
I go to a physical health club, and they're always stressing that with me, to breathe deeply. And it does have an effect upon the body.
Yeah, it's energizing.
Yeah.
Enlivening. And you're also connecting with the element of air. So let's breathe together in a sense of inspired confidence of being able to deal with whatever we have to face in this life, that we will be able to deal with it. That's my view. And maybe we get tested at times of feeling hopeless, but that's also an interesting state of mind too. If you get to a place of hopelessness, how's that? As I often suggest to myself and others in my work, is that if you can appreciate your hopelessness, rather than seeing it as a death certificate, if you can feel the profound quality of disappointment or even heartbreak, and hold that, the weight of it somehow, while still breathing.
That's a big order.
Where there's breath, there's life. Why do you think it's a big order to appreciate or relate with with your experience if you've gotten a death notice? You have no choice but to relate to it, right?
Well, you have these authority figures who are telling you that this is the cold reality that the medical tests show.
I think that's dependent, though, on taking their view, or that notion of the 70% of healing is a function of the belief and expectation that the healer is going to heal you. But if you get beyond that, beyond being dependent on externals to confirm or corroborate your potential, or if you can somehow work with the disappointment that you're not hearing what you want to hear. Say, well, I'm terribly disappointed in hearing that news, doctor, that you believe that my case is hopeless. That's very disappointing to me.
But sometimes that humor can be helpful. But I tell you, doctor, I will go to your own funeral.
Whoa. Yeah, I will go to your funeral, doctor. That's not only humorous, but it has a counterpunch to it.
Yes. And that's true sometimes. I've known people where that's happened.
In other words, you're not going to tell me what is the nature of my life and my life force and what's going to happen to my life and my life.
Well, I know one person, when the doctor told her she was going to die in the near future, she said, women in my family live into their late 90s. So I'm going to be the same way. All the doctor can say is, oh, don't be absurd, or the tests are there, and her response was, they don't necessarily happen the way you predict.
Right.
That's a guess,
Right.
an educated guess that you have
Right.
as a doctor. And,
I suppose in some instances when the factors are so formidable that a physician can make some sort of accurate statement about the vital signs are almost gone, but even then there's still hope of a miracle.
I had a young woman who, she got caught in a river in the mountains and swept over a small waterfall and hit her head. Did I tell this story before here?
I haven't heard it.
And true story. And she fractured her skull, had brain damage, and got to the hospital, was cared for, but she just didn't thrive. She couldn't eat. She just had no interest in eating. And the staff and the family were trying to get her to eat what kind of food that was required in her kind of a situation, but it didn't appeal to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being a scallywag, I said to her and to her family, what kind of food does she like? Forget what the hospital has. What kind of food does she like if she has her will and choice? Let's get her some of that food. We don't worry about whether it's healthful or has in it essential vitamins and minerals. And what did she like to eat?
Right.
And so we did, and she regained her interest in food, and eventually recovered and is fine today. But we had to go into her own value system and find something that spoke to her. It couldn't just be a medical advice. It had to be what made her heart glad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, our phone has not been ringing off the hook. You viewers out there, you must have run across people who have great hope and people who have very little hope for themselves, or hope for the country, or hope for their political party. Hope of many different things. Hope they're going to shoot a buck this hunting season. Hope is in many different directions. You haven't phoned in yet. We'd like to hear what you have to say. If you want, just talk about getting your deer this year. Will you be successful? You don't have to be personal and talk about your own health. Give us a call. We would like to hear you. I've never been to a deer camp event, but I understand that it's a way of life. Deer camp in the fall, where a bunch of people get together who are fond of each other and they go out to hunt for deer, but they really are looking for a bonding life, encouraging event. And the shooting the deer has little to do with it. It's just the excuse to get together.
I've heard that said. Some guys go and they don't even hunt.
That's right. They play cards instead and drink beer.
Yeah. A little time out from the rat race. Yeah.
But if they said that, people would be afraid that people would think of them critically, that that they had to have a rationale for being out there in the woods.
Maybe, yeah. Yes, indeed. I saw a picture in the paper today of speaking of deer hunting, an 11-year-old girl with her father who'd gotten her first buck.
Really? At
Yeah.
11 years old?
11.
Oh, boy.
She had kind of a bemused look on her face of, wow, did this really happen?
I wouldn't be a good deer hunter because I like animals too much.
Yeah, it's hard to take a life.
Yeah.
But in this instance of this girl and her dad was quoted in the article of saying that if they didn't take some of the deer out of the herd, that they would, they're not as healthy if they're overpopulated.
Yeah.
So it's in some ways part of the natural force to have predators that keep the balance of nature.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And the skill of a hunter is really, I think, really respects and appreciates the forces of nature and has respect for the animal that they're shooting. And one of my sons was moved out to Idaho a number of years ago, and he loves animals, very much loves animals. He used to come home from school go out in the woods and come back with a pocket full of salamanders. But he decided that he wanted to see what hunting was all about, and he had a friend who was a big game hunter, and they went elk hunting in the mountains of Idaho. And Jamie shot an elk.
He did.
And gutted the animal and carried it, dragged its carcass down the side of the mountain. And he said it was one of the most amazing experiences of his life. He didn't feel like he needed to repeat it, but that it was so incredibly powerful to...
What made it that way?
Just the vividness of the enormity of the reality of actually killing the prey that you're going to eat. And participating in it and honoring it and actually seeing the animal's heart, it's so real and so vivid, so genuine, as opposed to going to the meat counter at the price chopper. Somebody else has already taken care of the process of dispatching the animal.
That's true.
So I think he actually wrote quite a long epistle about it, how much he appreciated the animal, the life of the animal, and continued to have a deep respect and care for animals. But he also then had a respect for hunters and the nobility.
Particularly if they eat the food.
Right, right.
If they
exactly.
not only shoot the animal, but then they respectfully eat the flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think the Native American Indians would give thanks for the life of the animal they are killing, that the life is given up so they can live. A thankfulness of the generosity of the animal to die so that the Indians could survive.
Yeah. I try to do that every time I eat animal flesh. Thank the animal that gave its life so that I could live.
Hmm.
It's almost like a communion.
Yes, it is. I used to do a lot of fishing, particularly when I was a boy. I enjoyed fishing, and I also enjoyed gutting the fish and cleaning it up, and it was a religious rite in some ways for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was not just a nasty job, but to clean the scales off the fish and gut it well and prepare it for eating.
Yeah, there's an honest beauty to it.
Yeah.
This exchange is happening. And sometimes reminds me in a way, sort of perhaps cryptically or sardonically, of a poem by E.E. Cummings. You know of him?
Oh, yes.
Small print, E.E. Cummings.
He's one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
Poets.
He's got that famous line about the whole world was mud luscious in spring. And he talked about this in one poem, I don't remember the title of it, but it was about a guy who failed in everything he did in life. He just could not make a success of himself until he died and started a successful worm farm. His body became a vessel for earthworms.
Mm.
So that he, in some sense, I think the notion of giving back to the earth, that we rejoin the elements. There's this perpetual exchange of elements in life. It was a sort of a sardonic poem, of course. He was hopeless that he would ever succeed, but somehow, I think it was the poet's sardonic humor that, well, he finally died and they buried him and he started a successful worm farm. So he was a success. That's black humor, I guess you could say, Lee. Black humor is helpful in times of hopelessness. And I think even comedy is based on, a lot of black humor and comedy is based on hopeless situations. Gallows humor, they call it. And,
yeah, I guess if we think about the routine, the black routine that we used to hear, that's what you have.
Where would we be without humor?
We need it.
And didn't the ancient Greeks refer to the humors in the body, the spleen, the bile, the blood? They actually called them humors. I don't think that necessarily mean the same thing in a context, but humor has the quality of life to it, that resolves seeming opposites. Impossible situations are made workable through humor. So hope and humor, I think, go together, as well as will and hope. So it's not just an embedded concept, is it? It's
I don't think so.
woven into other aspects of how does one fashion hope when there doesn't seem to be any basis for it.
Blind hope.
Blind hope, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then what to do? Like my sight is failing me, as you know.
Yes.
Where do you have hope for the future when that's your situation?
Mm-hmm.
What enables you to keep taking your medication and seeing the doctor and doing what you're told to do? Why don't you just quit?
Yeah. You have hope. You could also perhaps be angry.
Say more about that.
Well, I'm reminded of that Dylan Thomas famous poem line of, "Don't go gently into that dark night. Rage,
Right.
rage against the dying of the light." Kind of the fighting spirit. Dying with your boots on, going down in a blaze of gunfire. Kind of will and force of will in the face of adversity. Maybe you don't have any hope, but you're not giving up. Would that be a fair way of putting it?
I suppose so. It's not my choice, but
Because I know you told me that macular degeneration, I believe, is your condition.
no, glaucoma.
Glaucoma, okay.
But it has led to some macular degeneration.
And that the research has not yet found an antidote to it.
Well, we've been forbidden by President Bush to investigate because it seems that the only reasonable solution would be doing stem cell repair. And the problem for me is that my stem cells are kind of shot. And if you could repair it, well, maybe they might work again. So I'm hopeful we have a new administration, and that I think he has made a statement that he's not against stem cell research.
So you still have hope.
I still have hope. Hooray. It doesn't mean that you want to kill babies to get somebody else's stem cells. I mean, I'm not for that either. But it's been twisted somehow to not mean what it's mentioned.
No, you don't want to enhance your life at the expense of
No.
another's.
Well, that doesn't give me joy. Not really.
Right. So I think that those kinds of matters get caught up in ideology more than a balanced view of life, possibility. But there's hope for a different take, as you suggest, in the days and months ahead. What about the auto industry? You think there's hope for that in the US of A? I heard an interesting point on the news last night about an expert from Motor Trend magazine who said the main problem of why there's not so much hope for the American auto industry is that it's too diversified, too many models, too many distributors. that they need to retool the whole operation in order to have any hope. But then there's all those folks that are going to be affected in the downstream effect if they do break up the big three. So I guess with this recession that we're in, there's a lot of people that are starting to wonder if they do have hope of their jobs being safe. It's a major challenge when you lose your job, you lose your livelihood, you lose your medical coverage. How do you keep your hope up under those circumstances? My brother's company just folded. He'd been with a company in Massachusetts for 25 years. And he knew they were in hot water, but it was thought they'd get through the holidays. But a couple of weeks ago, they made the decision to shutter the place. Everybody got their vacation pay, and that was it. And he was told to leave by the end of the day, take his tools and leave.
I don't quite get that.
His business was closed.
Oh, yeah.
His company was closed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He had this sense of, heart
His life
fear
was broken.
No health plan, or like he can get into the COBRA where you have to pay your own payments.
COBRA is expensive.
Yeah. So he went online to see if he could qualify for unemployment benefits. And, it took him 3 days of like 10 hours a day to break through the system. And he pointed out that one of his colleagues was not computer savvy and didn't have much patience, and didn't get in and lost his lost his opportunity for unemployment.
Yeah.
And he gave up hope and moved back in with his mother. His mother had retired to Florida some years ago, and he left and went back home. That was where his hope took him, or his absence of hope of being able to function in a modern economy. He went back home and moved in with his mom. So in that case, it was in contradiction to the old adage that you can't go home again. He went home. 37, 38 years old, 39 years old, he went home. There's always hope if you can come back home. Indeed. Still no callers ringing in, Lee.
No, I'm just disappointed.
We're sitting here all alone hoping for...
Come on, you all. Give us some hope.
Hoping for a jingle.
Look, we want some hope.
Jingle bells. We'll soon see the Salvation Army jingle bell people out.
We will.
There's a lot more people that are homeless and can't keep up with
It's depressing situation. And I was admiring Obama that he's had his peers talk to Bill Clinton. And how did Bill make it? Because Bill started out with a government that was in big debt.
Yeah.
And he was able to get them out of the debt and to actually enable them to make some money.
Yeah.
So his attitude was that he had hope that maybe he could learn from Clinton, in spite of the fact that it's a different time of the year, and in spite of it's a different situation. Maybe he could learn something that might help.
Mm.
And so he hadn't given up. Obama has not given up hope.
There's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yep.
You can fashion something out of whatever you have. My grandfather used to say, when he was an early immigrant to this country, or his father was an early immigrant to this country from Ireland, and they said they used to live on the smell of an oil rag. That was all they had to live on. It was just the fumes from an oil rag. That things were so dire. But you can always, I think it's in the Irish theme, you can always knock a good bit of crack out of something, as they say. In Ireland, I lived there in the 70s for a while. I was on sabbatical over there. And if a piece of wood fell off the back of a truck, somebody was immediately out in the street to take that piece of wood and put it to some use. Like constantly using what's available. And I think we kind of lost touch with that in our modern world, where we get so used to electronics and high-tech stuff that we lost touch with the trades and the washing our own windows and that sort of thing.
We used to do a lot of that self-help stuff. And it was World War II where we learned to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, we used to collect aluminum foil from cigarette packs and roll it into big balls and for recycling for defense purposes. Save twine, collect papers, pick blueberries, have your little truck garden in your backyard. Kind of brings you back to the elements. That's one of the things I like about this downturn, is that instead of hoping for some rescue from outside, that we have to kind of get our hands into the situation and work more directly with things.
How much more time do we have?
Looks like about 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
On the clock, yeah.
Well, we both grew up in the Depression times, and we made it, and our parents made it. So there's hope for us.
My grandparents took in boarders. They always would give a meal to somebody that was coming by on the street. If they couldn't give them any work, they'd give them a meal. Sharing what you have.
And it works.
Patching your own clothes, darn your socks. That's not good for the consumer society, though, if you make your clothes last longer than planned obsolescence designs for them. But up until recently, I used to darn my own socks.
Really?
Yeah.
My wife and I were talking about that. That was a ritual. We had something like a light bulb.
Yeah, it's like a wooden egg.
Yeah. And you put it in a sock and then
stitch it around the surface of the wooden egg. Yeah, it's good to be able to do that, to be able to tend to yourself and heal thyself. Physician, heal thyself. Yeah. Take more responsibility for fashioning your own well-being. It's a wonderful opportunity for a resurgence of confidence in ourselves, and we got a new government. If they don't get too liberal on us, and as the conservatives are concerned that it's just going to become a decadent society with massive giveaways, well, but look at all the giveaways for the big corporations that are going on. Hope is springing eternal. I have a good feeling about what's going to come out of all this stuff. I like how the notion of a New Deal, really empowering the middle class again. Reverend Udell. What were some of the chores you had as a kid?
Well, we had chickens.
Uh-huh.
We had about 50 chickens. And this was during World War II, and 5
minutes.
5 minutes. And so we not only had meat from the chickens and eggs from the chickens, but we had a surplus, more than we could eat. And so we sold some to the butcher at the grocery store, because they didn't have much for wholesale, and because it was all going to the military.
Mm.
And that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. And then we had what they called a victory garden.
Mm-hmm.
Was the name of it. That
Mm-hmm.
we had neighbors who we had more land than we needed, and so they came and we let them grow vegetables on our land.
So you were an early organic farmer and free-range chicken
Yes.
man.
I even thought of raising chickens as an adult, growing up with the free-range
Mm-hmm.
chickens, where you pull the range covering house around, and so the chickens could get fresh greens. I enjoyed that.
I think the more we return to the natural world, the greater the hope there is for
Yeah,
our species.
that's true.
We've really lost touch with the natural world and gotten so isolated and enclosed in steel and plastic and electronics that we're a facsimile of ourselves at this point and need to get back into the elements much more intensively.
I had heard somewhere, and you would know this probably because you're a psychologist, that if you take mice and you put more mice in a certain enclosed area, then that's ideal, that they will begin to have errant behavior patterns and get nasty with each other, and there's an optimal space that they need, and if they don't have that space, they come apart at the seams.
I've read that, yeah. But in terms of human culture, it's interesting how some cultures have different space requirements and can tolerate more intense
True.
closeness, proximity, let's put it that way, like in Chinese culture. I read somewhere that Shanghai is the most densely populated country, city in the world, where we couldn't imagine being that pressed in on each other, and they've learned to adapt to it.
Right.
We have bigger space needs in our culture.
Well, we have hope here, Richard, that somehow we'll be able to work things out.
I'm completely confident that we will have that occur. We've always managed to keep the ship afloat.
Our time is up. So thank you for being here, Richard. We've been talking with Richard Does about hope, the human requirement for hope, and how it works out in our own personal lives. And we wish you all great hope for the future, and we hope things go well for you.
Very happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Indeed.
A very hopeful day, Thanksgiving.